This is sort of part 2 or addendum to my previous video on ending poverty through universal basic services. The concept of basic social services being funded by taxes from economic activity and development is not new, which is why I could make that video with such conviction. When it is applied, they work. Not only does the economy grow, but people are happier and much more free in societies with these services than without. A society with these social services is often called a social democracy, a capitalist society where the means of production and businesses are owned privately by a small number of individuals who often do not work at those companies, but have basically all power of decision-making and running of the business, as well as power over the employees who do work there, and the point of the business is to generate profit for the owner or owners, shareholders, etc. And the employees generate this profit by selling their labor to the company at a loss compared to what they generate in surplus value or profit for said owners. The employees often have no say in the company or how it is run, and rarely get any form of share of the profits for doing well or working harder than others, or just in general. Outside of things like commissions for sales or upselling, or rare employee profit-sharing programs. If they ever do get acknowledged or rewarded, it might be something like a prize for doing the best job every month or a pizza party or something. That is, if you get any acknowledgement at all. The employees almost never have any say or input in company decision-making or company direction. Even if they have many years of experience and time on the floor, the bosses, owners, or shareholders are the ones who make all the rules and choices, even if they have never even worked at the company or could even do the job at all. This is the inherent downfall of capitalism. It is hierarchical and autocratic. It is not democratic. It is a dictatorship where the workers and owners have different conflicting material interests and goals. This inherently adversarial relationship can be put most simply as your employer wants you to work as long and as much as possible for as little pay as possible, while you, the employee, are incentivized to work as little as possible for as high of pay as possible, despite how you feel about the work. Even if you enjoy it, this is your incentive as a worker. If you worked in a pizza place because you like making pizzas and food and serving customers, that is not your job. Your job is to make as much money for your boss or company by way of selling pizzas, regardless of the quality of pizza or your experience. This isn't always the case with smaller private businesses where the owner is a worker, but it is the case in so-called public companies that trade on the stock market. And even under so-called mom-and-pop small businesses, the owners still hold all the cards and power, and if they do want to take input from the employees, they have no obligation to listen to it if they don't want to. Just because we have some protections for some workers to prevent things like sexual harassment or bigotry or wrongful termination, these protections are new and relatively unstable and can easily be rolled back and chipped away at because business owners have so much money and power, and often also time, since their income is not based on working and wages, but on others working for them. So they use that power and influence to work with lawmakers and government to solidify, maintain, and expand their power. Which brings me to the crux of my argument. While we can end poverty at any time, and have been able to for a long, long time, we haven't, because capitalism inherently requires poverty to maintain this power imbalance. Europe, and especially Scandinavia, are the most socially democratic places on Earth. While none of them have completely eliminated poverty and totally universalized all 5 services, many of them have invested a lot in many of them and have a form of universal health care, access to education, and decent transportation services. The fact is, all of these services are in danger of losing funding through tax cuts for the wealthy and owner class, putting undue burden on the working wage-based class who don't have the money to spare, while also just eroding these well-liked public services available to all and replacing them with private, profit-focused versions that just can't cut it because, again, unlike public services, where the goal is to provide the best possible service for the good of everyone, privatization inherently changes the goal from good service to profitable investment, which leads to higher costs and lower quality. I'm not saying just because something is done by the government it's good. They can often be neglected and underfunded, which leads to despair and inefficiencies which compound over time, but when the goal is profit, the goal is not good service. And often profit and good services and quality are antithetical to each other. Capitalism does not necessitate innovation. The only innovation provided by capitalism is how to charge more money for less quality or service. Another problem is that in these places, like Europe, These services get funded through imperialism and exploitation of the global south, which on top of just being absolutely unjustifiable, is totally unnecessary and simply not sustainable long term, and also is stifling to the progress of those exploited regions anyway. Because capitalism is hierarchical and requires poverty to exist, you make more profits by cutting costs, including wages. Wages are considered costs. Remember, capitalism is about making money for owners, not workers. Workers are considered a business expense. And having lots of unemployed people who can replace the current workforce if they start to demand higher wages leads to lower wages for everyone, making the rich richer and the poor poorer. So UBS can eliminate poverty, and do so rather easily, but it is not a permanent solution. The inherent antagonism of capitalist economics, where the goal is profit and not progress, cannot be fixed within capitalism. Even state-run economies still have this class division between workers and owners, the owner is just the state in this case, and can be manipulated to enrich the political class at the expense of the working class. I do recommend social democracy, or UBS, as an instrumental goal within capitalism to end artificial poverty, but it is not the end goal because there is no such thing as ethical capitalism. Capitalism requires poverty to function long term. Even under my ideal vision of the world, described in the UBS video, with everything and more, universal, well-funded, ever-improving social services providing food, housing, healthcare, including mental health care, education, and transportation options, walkable neighborhoods with affordable and free third-place community spaces, while it would expand the economy and move progress forward for everyone, workers still sell their labor for a wage at a loss to owners and shareholders who do not work and do not provide anything of value and simply siphon wealth from the economy and complain about their high taxes and needing the rate of profit to rise no matter what, year over year, even at the expense of progress. In fact, especially at the expense of progress. Under capitalism, you cannot make a perfect thing while also experiencing continued growth. Once you hit market saturation, your profits will level off. And while that's not really a problem for most people, and should actually be the goal, capitalism requires continued growth, not just sustained, profitable business. Once this happens, costs need to be cut in either quality or wages, which are considered expenses and not profits, for the owners to continue to make more and more money as time goes on. Imagine if a company made a perfect chair, one that is comfortable, affordable, and lasts decades with little to no maintenance. Initially, profits will boom, because they have outcompeted their competitors. But after a few years, and once everyone who needs one has one, the company will have to either cut corners, make lower quality chairs that don't last as long so people have to come back and replace them, or lay off workers, or lower wages, or find another way to cut costs and continue growth. Or they risk going out of business. The goal of capitalism isn't to make the best thing, the best product or service. It's to make the most profit and more profit every year. And when the goal is profits, making a thing that is bought once and never again is actually bad for business. This is why, to truly end poverty forever, we must move past capitalism's profit-based economic model to a progress or a standard of living based model. Under a post-capitalist model, where everyone has their needs met and work is done because people want to do it or because it is societally necessary, making the perfect thing becomes valuable again. Because the only people making those things, like chairs and furniture or other mass-produced items like clothes or even food, will be those who want to and for those who need them. And the people doing the work to make them would have full democratic control of the business, because administrators would only exist as needed and would be an elected or even rotating temporary position, if it exists at all, where they are accountable only to the other workers and to the community, not a separate class of leeches and ticks who hold all of the power, take all of the wealth, and yet do none of the labor. Once that thing, like a chair, reaches market saturation, the company can decide to slow down or even cease production until it is needed again, and the focus can finally become making the best version of the product or service possible for the good of everyone, rather than selling that product or service so the owner can make as much money as possible for as long as possible at the expense of everyone else. This is why full co-ops do so much better in volatile markets compared to standard private ones. First of all, they don't need to sell their labor at a loss because they don't have any executives or shareholders to siphon the surplus value created when turning raw materials into commodities, because the workers are the executives. They can sell the items cheaper and keep the full value of their contribution, thus probably getting paid even more. And if demand slows down, they can decide as a group what to do. They can take less hours, or slightly lower pay, distributed over the whole workforce voluntarily, or even shut down the firm until demand rises again, or even repurpose the equipment and pack up and move on to the next thing. Things like sudden mass layoffs or pay cuts will be a thing of the past, because everyone owns the firm together and potential issues can be discussed and prepared for as they come, and there are no executive bonuses to take precedent over workers' job security. Capitalism requires poverty to function because at the end of the day, it is entirely about supporting those at the top at the expense of those at the bottom, and if you tax the profits of capitalists who make their wealth by owning rather than working, it exposes the entirely superfluous and parasitic nature of the ownership class as a whole, and so they will fight to maintain their wealth and power by leveraging that wealth and power to claw back their autocratic domination of the rest of the population by any means necessary. It doesn't matter how tall and strong a tree is, it can still be choked and leached by vines and parasites. It doesn't matter how beautiful your garden is, if you don't pull up the weeds, it will be overtaken. And finally, it doesn't matter how perfect your social democracy is, if you do not get rid of the oppressive and useless owning class, who make their wealth not by producing, but by exploiting those who do, they will use their power to expand their wealth and influence at the expense of the workers and erode the very protections from their oppression that social democracy provides. There is no such thing as ethical capitalism, because capitalism requires exploitation, and so to truly eliminate poverty and suffering once and for all, while pushing for social services and basic rights is important and must be done, they will never last under capitalism, and so the only way to ensure a true end to poverty, unnecessary suffering, artificial scarcity, etc., and create an expanding economy that benefits everyone equitably and continually is to end capitalism and replace it with democratic, universal, collective, citizen, not governmental ownership. Ensure everyone has access to their basic needs, as said in the first video: food, housing, healthcare, including mental health care, education, and transportation, and no one can profit off the labor and exploitation of others. Not everyone has to work, and eventually all undesirable work will be automated. But the only way to continue human progress and for everyone to benefit from that instead of just the business owners is to get rid of private business owners entirely and give everyone ownership of the economy equally and democratically. Personal property would still exist, no one wants your toothbrush or underwear, but business and lands will be governed by the people who work them and live in them, equitably and democratically.